Hey friends, Brian here. I'm bringing you a special panel discussion here for this episode of George Fox Talks. You are going to love it. It's one of the best panel discussions, humbly, if I may say, that you are going to hear anywhere on the topic of AI and technology and faith. The people on this panel, Andy Crouch, popular Christian author, Megan Sullivan, professor at Notre Dame, Isaac Choi, director of the George Fox Honors Program, and Tyler Staton, local pastor of Bridgetown Church. These individuals just give us deep, passionate, faithful takes on how we should deal with AI and technology in our world. I'm so excited for you to see this. We're going to get to some of your questions, but we're going to start this panel with some fireworks. Who wants fireworks right immediately? Immediately. One of the hottest AI books out right now has a very subtle title. I'm going to say that's title. I want you to guess what you think it means. It's called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies. It's about AGI, artificial general intelligence, the idea that there might be a leap in this technology so quick and it will just lead to essentially a situation where there's a cataclysm, where the robots are too powerful. And I'm going to ask the panel right now. In fact, I want to start with Dr. Choi. And I want to ask him, as a theologian, as a philosopher, as a professor here at George Fox, as someone with children, I mean, this is a serious question. Are you worried about this? Do you think we should be worried about this? This question that AI will overtake us?
I'm not so worried about doomerism with regard to like the end of the world coming in 2027, as one website claims, right? So I'm not as worried as with regard to that book that came out, but I am much more worried about how my children and younger children are going to be affected cognitively, that they're not going to be developing in the ways that they would normally develop, and that in many ways they'll become handicapped by an over-reliance on AI. So that's the kind of doom that I'm much more concerned about and that we need to avert, as opposed to like, Terminator style, like Skynet taking over the world kind of thing. I think that's a very low probability event. Whereas like many generations of children being like basically intellectually handicapped by this technology, I think that's a much higher probability scenario.
Wow, Dr. Sullivan, you want to weigh in on this? I see you already have the mic. What do you think?
Yes, so I'm not a doomer. I think it's an interesting debate that we could have if we had another discussion around about whether or not any person of faith could be a doomer. But
you mean that there's a possibility that we could argue that a person of faith should not even be a doomer, not even believe that that could be possible?
It shouldn't believe that the world is going to end because of a human-made piece of technology. Like when the world ends, it's going to happen in God's time and according to His plan. And just living in faith means that you realize that there's always hope. I also think, and this gets kind of shows a little bit about my views in the tech industry. We've kind of gotten into this mess because we've ceded so much power to developers. And when Eli Yudkowsky, I don't know how to say his last name.
Eliezer Yudkowsky is the one who wrote this book, yeah.
When folks in that area say, be terrified of something that I control, or only I have the means of controlling or developing, it's a way of getting power from you. And there's a reason why non-religious movements or certain bad religious movements, they oftentimes start by getting people to be afraid and to feel powerless and to feel like somebody else is going to be the savior or the salvation and that they should be paying attention to that person. And I think that's spiritually dangerous for us. And also, there's always something really false under those kinds of movements. So I'm a skeptic.
I'd love to hear the other two of you. Let's just go for it, round robin on this.
Yeah, the last thing I want is to have the last word on this question, so let me jump in.
Get in there now.
I want to try to answer your question directly. Am I worried about this? No. Partially because of what you just said. Immediately I went to kind of like, I'm operating from a frame about the story of the world that I think lends itself toward hope. I genuinely believe that the world gets renewed because Christ comes to reign as king, and I'm ultimately hoping in that. And I don't think that you can be a doomer and then that negates that possibility. I just think that's sort of where my focus is set, not on what bad thing might come between now and then. Secondly, it's probably just because of my personality. Like, I'm the furthest thing from an alarmist. What came to my mind when you asked that was when that moment in American history when we all suddenly became very aware of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a Christian pastor, I remember being in an argument with my elders, like, what do you mean we can't meet this Sunday? Like, I'm open to coming to the table slightly differently. Like, maybe we don't use the common cup once because certain people are worried. But so anyway, I just think I was off on that one.
So you're saying your track record.
Yeah, I'm just saying my opinion here couldn't be less reputable. So to answer the second half of the question, should I be worried about that? Maybe.
Very comforting, Tyler, very comforting. Okay, I don't entirely agree with several of these folks. First of all, I would actually up the ante a bit. I believe the scenario in that book is really not what we call artificial general intelligence, AGI, but ASI, true superintelligence that's orders of magnitude better at whatever intelligence is than any human beings individually, collectively have ever been. My own estimation of the probability we're going to achieve that is low. I don't know, 5%. I would have said 0% 5 years ago, so that's a notable change in a way. But I like, at a conceptual level, look, Revelation narrates the fall of Babylon the Great. Fallen is Babylon the Great. Her merchants no longer go out trading, and then there's this huge long list of things that Babylon trades in, beautiful things. And the merchants and princes of the earth wail and mourn because she's fallen. And the last thing that it trades in, by the way, is human lives, which are in the list of commodities that Babylon trades in. It is not a denial of Christian hope, which of course we are all invited and commanded to hold. And I completely believe, I believe in the new city, the New Jerusalem. But I also read in the same book that teaches me to hope for the New Jerusalem and the Lamb sitting on the throne, that Babylon falls. And I think we live in an empire as powerful as, I take the primary reference of Revelation, just to put my interpretive cards on the table, to be Rome. I think when John's readers read that, they're reading a prediction of the fall of Rome. Rome did fall. The Roman Empire did cease to exist as an imperial power. And when it happened, it was like the stars fell from the sky and the earth and heavens were shaken for people who lived through that collapse. And I also believe that applies to every human empire that sets itself up over against God. It collapses. So on net, through various probability pathways, my own estimation of some societal collapse because of what we're developing with AI is roughly 15%, if I had to put a number on it. In 2012, the Obama administration asked the National Science Foundation to evaluate the probability of a mass coronal ejection from the sun that would be such a powerful electromagnetic storm that would knock out all electronics by basically inducing current in every chip and fusing every chip so that all our digital devices just stop working. And they did a lot of research on this. Actually, since then, solar activity has picked up, interestingly. But at that time, they estimated there was an 18% chance of it happening within 15 years. And it didn't. So it's like you got 7 bullets in the revolver, and you spin it, and click, oh, we're okay. I mean, does that sound like good odds, bad odds? Like, all this stuff is so stacked. The technology stack we're built on is way more precarious than we know. So I'd give about rough odds to AI being the collapse of this Babylon that we currently live in, and mass coronal ejection. And neither are, strictly speaking, probable. Neither is negligible. And for the people of God, when Babylon falls, the poor of the earth are rejoicing that the Lamb's judgment has come on an empire that exploits the rest of the earth and the peoples of the earth and is opposed to the true God of the earth. And so the thing is, if you feel nervous about that, it's because you currently benefit from Babylon rather than being truly seeing the world the way God does, which is, what are they doing to my prime directive for my people and who's being exploited and used by this system? And then suddenly fallen as Babylon the Great becomes a great cry of hope from the wretched of the earth. So not that we should ever celebrate when those kind of cataclysms happen, because they all kinds of collateral damage. But low probability, but not zero. Probably not the way that book describes, for reasons, I have technical opinions about it, but high probability of Babylon falling because we're told it's going to fall.
100% Babylon's falling.
100%. In some way, at some time.
I'd like to change my answer to actively worried.
All right, Tyler. For that joke, we're coming straight to you for this one. Some have said that in the social media era, last 25 years, Christians have been asleep at the wheel. Like, we missed out, we were not leaders. For the Catholic Church, in her lecture earlier, Megan had owned that as a Catholic and said, we lost moral credibility because of abuse scandals. Like, I was just so taken aback by that realization, like, oh no. About evangelicals, though, a particular kind of Protestant, at least historically, in the United States, maybe the leadership wasn't there either. I wondered why. I was thinking, and here was my thought. I wonder what you think about this thought, Tyler. Why did evangelicals, broadly speaking, non-denominational types, Protestants, why did they miss out on this leadership? Because we've just lined up behind power and influence and engaged in massive idolatry, which means line up behind whatever thing is the strongest. Oh, we're supposed to go online and build our brand? Great, I'm in, let's do it, right? Is that why we missed out? Is that why we've missed out on leadership? And I include myself in this group. Or do you think there's another reason?
I would say that is absolutely among the reasons. I think I would add to that to a fault, the evangelical movement in the American church has been profoundly future-oriented and profoundly ignorant of our ancient roots. And much of what I talked about today is simply saying, what if we just kept living the ancient way in a new time and place? And I think that the evangelical movement wasn't thinking nearly ancient enough and was untethered from the strong roots of the Christian church in a way that made us uniquely vulnerable to ignorantly riding every wave like it was God's wave for us to ride, rather than being discerning about the culture that we're a part of, knowing there are bits of redemption and corruption in everything, and what we're always called to do is parse that out as followers of Jesus and be discerning about the culture and time that we live in, and therefore enter into it thoughtfully as people who are resiliently ancient in an ever-changing modern landscape.
Wow, yes.
Yeah, does anyone else want to jump in on that? I don't want to control the vibe here. Anyone can just talk. Go for it.
I was just going to put in a plug for our honors program, because we read the great works throughout history. We're trying to retrieve the wisdom of the ancients and try to apply that to our today, but I can't not do that in that context after what Tyler said. But I want to add a little bit, connecting this with regard to the doomerism question, because I think that there's the tendency to kind of go to extremes, right? Like, there's a tendency of people who are like all doom and gloom. We got to avoid all technology, like, become the modern Luddite, that kind of idea. And then the flip side is like the total technology boosterist. It's like AI will solve all our problems, cure cancer, provide all limitless energy. Like, I think both extremes are just as wrong. Right, and same thing with like the corresponding like virtue of like hope and despair. I mean, the vice, hope and despair. Like, I think there's this tendency, unlimited hope in technology and unlimited despair because of technology. And I think like having that kind of sense of like, yes, there are deep dangers here. There's some small probability of deep disaster here, in fact, but that at the same time, it's not something that we should totally withdraw from, but that we should engage it in a very thoughtful way, as our speakers have today. So I just want to connect those two aspects.
Let's honor our table of high schoolers who are here. Give it up for the high schoolers. I know there are probably more in the room. A lot of students here. We're going to take a question from the high school table, straight up. I know, Andy, you might be a natural person to answer this, but not limited to you alone. They're basically asking, should we go back to flip phones? and give it up during, just give up essentially this temptation to magic during adolescence. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And that's amazing that you're thinking about that. It would be super courageous to actually do that if that's not what you currently do, but you would only end up with better friends, better sleep, a more sense of connection to God. You're going to be tethered to a glowing rectangle for your whole adult lives. Why not put it off as long as possible? I will say one other thing about it, though. Around age 16, at least in my state, I don't actually know what it is here, we do entrust people around age 16 with a 2-ton assembly of metal and glass that's very useful and can do great damage. And our society's kind of collectively judged that that's the time when you're kind of ready to handle that level. The ability to take a lot of lives out with your own through foolishness. I think that if we can entrust you with 2 tons of metal and glass that's useful and can do great damage, I think we can trust you. We can trust you with 10 ounces of metal and glass that is useful and can do great damage. So I'm not in principle opposed to something other than a flip phone. Later in high school, our kids had it around the time they started driving. On the other hand, people ask me what's the right age for a smartphone. I say, well, my relationship with my phone was finally fully healthy at about age 49, so that's what I would recommend. So if you really want to know, yeah. But no, when in doubt, err on the, and then what's on it? You also have a choice. You can take a lot of things off that phone that are by default installed. So you can also make a bunch of choices, even if you use the glowing rectangle form factor, because it might have some usefulness, to not let it become your magic window into not growing in heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Yeah, it's powerful. Can I ask this, particularly to our philosophers? I direct this to you, Megan, and maybe to Isaac as well. I've heard some discussion of AI that almost makes it sound like a version of an apologetics concept. And because this is at heart an apologetics conference, I want to invoke this concept. Has anyone ever heard of this idea of the God of the gaps argument? So God of the gaps is something like, well, science can't yet explain this one trick, so it must be God that can do that. Then science explains it. Then you're like, well, yeah, science explains that, but what about this? And then you just keep kind of pushing it out. Maybe that's just a simple explanation of it, but I hope it'll work to say, I've heard in discussions of AI something that started to sound to me like a person of the gaps kind of argument. Only people can do this. Oh, shoot, now AI can do that. Oh, but it can't do this. Oh, well, now GPT-5 just dropped and it can. It's actually up to the level of a PhD. Does this analogy make sense? And are we participating in something like a person of the gaps argument? And in fact, AI is just going to get there.
Yeah, I first heard about this person in the gaps or human of the gaps idea just a few days ago. Mike Sakassis, if you guys know this guy, he's an excellent writer. He keeps a Substack called The Convivial Society where he writes a lot about Christianity and technology, and I think he's just incredible. But he was delivering a talk where he talked about this idea, and I was like, oh, wow. As a philosopher, God of the gaps comes out of debates in philosophy of physics, the thought that as we just discover more and more about how the natural world works, every increment of discovery we make, we have less need for a concept of God. And this person in the gaps idea is as we design models that can do more and more of the things that we used to think were special or inherent in us, we have less and less in need of the concept of a human person. And we joke about this. I think you kind of roll your eyes about that in a group like this that's really pro-dignity or very sensitive to it. But warning, guys, there are people that absolutely believe this. I'll give you a concrete example. Some folks from my institute and I were at a very prestigious West Coast University's AI research lab a few months ago for a collaboration on a very secular AI ethics project that we're working on. And they were also just showing off some of their cool tools to us as we were there for the collaboration meeting. And they were showing us an AI that simulates humans with mental health issues. So humans with depression or humans with psychosis. And it's an audio AI, so you talk to it and it talks back to you and it sounds exactly like you're talking to a human being on the phone. And they're using it to train clinicians, so using it to train therapists, and it monitors data about your treatment. And we're listening to this eerie very emotional voice of an AI who is suffering AI-induced depression. And my colleague from Notre Dame notes to the room, she's just like, man, this is scary. It's so good at imitating human heart and human emotion. You can just see how naively folks might think that it really has emotions. And the researcher said, naively, like, oh, honey, the burden is on you now to show that this isn't emotion. Like it passes the emotion Turing test. There is no way to distinguish what this thing does from what a human being with depression that you might be talking to might be feeling. And he's like, he's crossed that bridge. He says, now you need to prove to me that there's any difference between human emotion and what this simulates. And this, to my mind, Christians have to adamantly resist this human of the gaps assumption that there's something about us that can be like just incrementally imitated by technology and gradually replace us. But how we find the language and the philosophical depth to do that, I mean, we're gonna have to dig deep. We're gonna need, you plug for the honors program. I'll make a plug for like, do not defund your philosophy PhD program in your state government. We need like a couple people thinking about this, or your theology degrees, because we really need like our smartest brains writing. We need the Aquinas of the 21st century to emerge, because these are very, very, very hard questions that I don't know the answers to. Isaac, do you?
This is like, the question that people ask, have you stopped beating your wife? I mean, you can't win either way. No, I think it's very interesting, like Ray Kurzweil, like he's an AI futurist, he's a total like gung-ho pro, technology guy. He makes this observation that like, back, in the 90s when, humans could always win over the best chess playing AIs. We thought if an AI could play chess, then it's human level intelligence. But then surprisingly, IBM created a supercomputer that could beat the best human chess masters at chess. And then Ray Kurzweil's like, and after that, people were like, big deal. It can't write poetry. And, and then they keep moving the goalposts, and ChatGPT came out in 2022. It's like, well, that's not the human thing. There's some other thing. And this is exactly the phenomenon that Megan's referring to. And I think that there is this, maybe I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to get a little more philosophical here. Like, there's this mistaking the outward operations of an AI or LLM or whatever with the inward understanding and consciousness of a human being. And philosophers have long understood that you can't equate the two. I mean, even psychologists, sorry, I shouldn't say that in that way. I don't want to denigrate psychologists.
Let's just pause. I'm
going to get stoned by the psychologist.
Explain what you mean by even psychologists.
What I'm saying, let me rephrase that. Many decades ago, psychologists recognized that behaviorism, which was a movement in psychology that said you only have the external observable, actions and words of a person, that is the sum total of, their experiences. So an example would be, since we can't see the person in pain, like their actual pain, their pain really is just their actions, their tears that come out, their wincing, that's what pain is. And psychologists recognize, no, that does not capture what the pain really is. But what these AI, boosterists like Ray Kurzweil are saying is, well, once we get an AI that's so good at imitating human behavior and actions, then that is just what it is to feel sad, to feel happy, to understand things. But that's, again, psychologists have known this for decades, right? Philosophers have known this for decades. But I feel like some of these boosters of AI, they don't recognize that distinction. And it's a really important distinction that is just completely ignored.
I have Tyler in mind for this question, and also Andy. Andy, because of the content of your talk. Tyler, also because you're a pastor and you have probably lots of single people in your church, people struggling with relationships, asking how in this era do I find a spouse? How do I find somebody to connect with? And this goes directly, Andy, to a comment you made. Maybe it was a little bit joking, maybe it wasn't. You can clarify. I'm going to the audience for this one. If AI can create a better boyfriend, why would we want something other than that?
Yes, great question.
Last time it didn't work well when I went before you. I think this is connected to the thoughts I was having on the last question. When I listened to Megan's presentation today, I was really initially taken along with the cardinal by the idea of dignity. But then as the day has worn on and I've listened to more and had discussion, I've really been smitten by love. I'm thinking about years ago, I read this collection of essays on fatherhood by the novelist Michael Chabon. And in the introduction to that collection of essays, he talks about his greatest regret as a father being the amount of time that he poured into his books during his children's formative years in his home. And as they were graduating from high school and moving out, he has this beautiful explanation where he says something along the lines, he kind of goes through the reasons that it wasn't worth it. And then he says something along the lines of, most of all, my books, unlike my children, cannot love me back. And I think that what he was tapping into is what is theologically called the true and false self, which is to say that success, it does make someone feel similar to how love makes someone feel. Wow. You know, like it makes me feel loved. It makes me feel like more. Yeah. However, it does so by appealing to my ego, not my soul, or to my false self rather than my true self, meaning it does so by appealing to a fundamentally expiring part of me. Because one day I'm going to retire, and then they'll throw me a party and celebrate what I accomplished, and then everyone will immediately not care because there's young and hungry people ready to try to succeed. And all of the attention will go there, and I will be forgotten. And this is one of the reasons that even psychologists know that suicide rates skyrocket at retirement age for men. And so, you know, I think I would say, even if an AI bot can make you feel loved, like better than a human man can, it cannot appeal to the true self.
Right.
Only to the false self, only to the shallow part of you. There is an image of God imprinted on the human soul that God has chosen through his image bearers to awaken and draw out of one another so that we're partners in one another's redemption. And so I think AI probably can work very similar to the way that success or any other lesser love, any other of Aquinas' substitute gods can work in the world, and that is why these things are so attractive. And yet they cannot actually make us more, because it's similar to what I was describing about my Sunday routine and how it feels good to be wanted for my usefulness, but it cannot touch just being wanted for my person and my being. And only another image bearer of God has the power to touch that part of me.
Wow. Good. So good.
Yeah, Andy, do you want to add anything to it? You kicked us off with the AI boyfriend idea earlier.
I cannot improve on that, and it is what I would have wanted to say if I could have said it that well. Only that, I both was being like more serious than I would like to have to be. That I do think there's the great rupture in the human story from the deepest fault line in humanity is between man and woman, made for one another, initially celebrated by one another, and yet now very estranged from each other, no matter how much we try to overcome it. And so, I guess I would want to say also, falling in love, which is a tumbling into an almost unwilled level of desiring the good of another, which is love categorically, and letting that carry you into covenant. It is the great adventure of life, should you be granted it. And if you're not, there are other very meaningful ways that God gives you the same path, but it's this thing that is the reuniting of what's most broken. In one sense, it's more unsatisfying than you can imagine before you try it. And in another sense, it's like what we're made to do. Also, there are babies. That is the other thing. And even more so grandbabies. And I follow a very secular writer who is in his 70s now, and he says, he looks at all his friends and he says, the one thing I can say, if you want to be happy toward the end of your life, do everything until then to maximize your chances of having grandchildren. And I know not all of us will have grandchildren, but I do like the idea of all of us doing the things that would maximize the chances. I think if we all, it's a little bit of the universal maxim. Like if we all actually acted in such a way as to maximize that, and the way we honored men and women, and the way we carried ourselves with the hope of entering into that kind of covenant, I think it would be better for the whole world, even though not all of us, for all kinds of reasons, will end up there. And I am legitimately concerned. Every country that has adopted the full panoply of modern technology is now below birth rate replacement birth rate. South Korea adopted technology faster than any nation in the world, and it is on track for there to be no more Koreans by 2070, I believe. Because they're at like 0.7, which is completely inadequate to replenish their own cultural tradition and heritage. And I literally worry about not the extinction risk of AI killing us, but people just having enough other things to do besides the very, very challenging thing of falling in love, making a covenant, and having a baby, that we will end up without people to fulfill God's desire that the earth be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So there is also that. Mm.
Years ago, there was an acronym people used. I don't think they use it as much today. It's FOMO. Have you heard FOMO? Fear of missing out. Fun fact, we nicknamed our dog FOMO Baggins. I don't know why. He's one of those types, you know? I heard another acronym, though, and I pitched this to anyone to whom on the panel here to whom this question might inspire. So someone jump in on this, okay? But I heard the acronym kind of playing off FOMO. It's FOBO, fear of becoming obsolete. This idea that if we can't figure out technology fast enough, if I don't get an iPhone fast enough, if I don't have an iPhone, if my friend has an iPhone, and if they're using AI and now I can't do my homework like they're doing it, and if I don't do it, and if I won't have the point, you know, has anyone gone through this spiral in your mind, in your life? If I don't do this, someone else is doing this, and I will become obsolete. Not necessarily obsolete vis-a-vis the technology or the robot. I'm going to become obsolete vis-a-vis Isaac. Like he's just going to be, you know, that much better. And if the church doesn't engage in this, the world is going to pass us up. We will not be reaching the nations for Christ. This kind of thinking. I wonder how Christians should react to that, how educators should react to that, how pastors should react to that. This fear that if we don't use in a particular way, we will be left behind, essentially, that we'll be lost. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Like we're exhorted constantly in the Gospels to stop being afraid. Like, do not be afraid. Fear is definitely the first step in making dumb decisions for us, and has been for 2,000 years. And I'm curious about the conversations you guys had today. I work at a university. Universities are experiencing acute FOBO right now. The number of faculty meetings that I have to go to where an administrative leader stands up and says, we got to figure out AI. Like we should be using it for every assignment. No, we shouldn't be using it for anything. And like just this fear of like the sky is falling. Our students won't have any jobs. We will not have prepared them for this world. And people get themselves all worked up, and then nothing is resolved. And I know a lot of folks who in their workplaces is going through this right now. Like, we need AI in everything. And there's this fear that does prevent us. We do need to change. Like, I'm probably more techno-optimistic than others folks on these panels. I think teaching will change. I think all of our workplaces are going to change. The internet changed our lives, and this is going to change our lives. But fear is the enemy of discernment. And I come out of those meetings thinking, my gosh, like I've been in my career for 20 years. I had a period as an undergraduate training for it before I entered graduate school. So I've got a good 25 years under my belt of discerning what it is to be a philosopher. And for 2,400 years in the Western world, people have been dealing with transitions and asking that question. I'd like to think like you should have a little bit of self-confidence that that I will once again like wake up and be able to discern how to be a philosopher, and that we will discern the appropriate uses for this. And I do think that like the fear plays into the hands of the people who are trying to sell you a product. That it helps for people to destabilize your identity, to destabilize your confidence, so that they can like swoop in and take advantage of you and sell you something. And people of discernment should not be afraid of anything other than God.
Wow, it's beautiful. Good. Can I say one thing about it? Oh, sorry, Isaac.
No, go.
Well, first of all, if your real calling is to be a heart, soul, mind, strength, complex, designed for love, that is not going obsolete. And no one, no system, no machine, no corporation, no nation can do it for you. I also think, look, our callings are very contingent. So I think of every human being as having three callings. You're called to bear the image of God. If you're part of God's family, the church, you're called to restore the image of God in the world. And then there's this third thing, which I call, borrowing a term from philosophy, your contingent calling. Contingent is things that aren't necessary. They could be otherwise. They depend on other things. And each of us is doing something today. Many of us are doing something that gets us paid. That's super contingent. My employer is getting paid for me to be here today. 7 years ago, I got off a plane and had a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, where I lost feeling in one side of my body. It could have been a stroke, except the clot just moved through the blood vessel and moved on and didn't do any lasting damage. That could happen to me tomorrow morning. I could lose my ability to speak. I could lose my use of my limbs in a stroke. I mean, I have a little opening in my heart called a patent foramen ovale that a lot of people have, and it could happen again. Okay, if that happens tomorrow, my contingent calling totally changes, because I can't sit up here and sound smart about AI or whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing here. And I lose my job. I can't do my job if I have a massive stroke. My calling to bear the image of God and be part of God's story of restoring his image does not change one bit. It's just I have a new contingent calling. And so maybe I will be obsolete, or any given one of us may be economically obsolete. Doesn't mean you're not a heart, soul, mind, strength, complex designed for love. Doesn't mean you don't bear the image, and doesn't mean you aren't actually, maybe even more in your weakness, obsolescence, the discovery that you are not successful, that you're not defined by the things you do in the world, your achievements. You might actually be more part of God's mission than ever in your life after a disabling or an economically dislocating event like that. So indeed, do not be afraid.
Dignity.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, like, the antidote to fear is faith in God's providence, right? In the sense that, like, in all the chaos and confusion and change in the world, that we trust that God has a plan, not just for the world as a whole, but us as individuals. And that plan might not look like what we think it should look like, as Andy said before, but that plan is good. That at the end will be like, I see, God, how you wove that tapestry in the way that you intended for the good of us, for me as an individual, and as a society, as a world. And I guarantee you there's going to be massive disruption in the coming years, in the coming decades from AI. Again, I think the catastrophic thing is fairly low probability, but I think the disruption is going to be real. Yep. And we already see like jobs like disappearing right now, right? Because of AI. But I think like in the midst of that, trusting that God has our back, right? I mean, and I think that that's something that we bring to the conversation that is uniquely Christian, in the sense that we don't think that this is just a tale that signifies nothing, filled with fairy. Again, I'm misquoting Shakespeare, but you know what I'm talking about, right? This idea that like there is meaning and purpose, even though we may not discern it at the moment, that we trust that God is with us. And I think that's always like, you know, as Megan said, like New Testament's like, fear not, because I'm here, I'm with you, I'll be with you to the end of the age. And I think that that is the thing that really encourages me, despite the uncertainty, right? Despite the uncertainty that like God is with us. And even in ministry, in the church, I think about like the technological developments that have been instrumental, like the printing press, Gutenberg, right? Like that was so massive. I mean, you trace the trajectory of that in terms of like what it meant for the Bible to be printed, that people could read it. I mean, it was revolutionary for missions, for ministry, everything like that. But I don't think we're going to say that all the things that God accomplished in the century since Gutenberg was because of the power of the printing press. No, it's because the providence of God, the power of God, the Spirit of God used that technology to bring about his purposes. And we can see that discern. And so in the similar kind of way, and of course the printing press was used for really bad things too, but like I think in the similar kind of way, I think with AI, there is promise in that God will use it in good ways to counterbalance some of the bad ways, but that it's not in the power of the AI. No, it's because we trust the Lord who is the Lord of that technology and that can use it in a good way. So I just want to say that.
I'll just add one thing.
Go for it, man.
Yeah, I'll try to be really simple. Immediately when this question was asked, I thought of the high schooler table question about flip phones. You know, I think that's such a courageous question, because the truth is, if you were to do that, I think it would form you into a much better person. And I think there would be social cost to that decision. There would be types of interaction and probably things and ways of being with peers that you do actually miss out on. And I think I want to direct all of our attention to the fact that when Jesus talks about the kingdom of God, he's constantly using agricultural metaphors. And seeds grow really slowly and require a winter where it's dark and cold, and you just have to trust that something's happening under the earth, though you can't see any of it taking place. So does everything that lasts in this world and in you requires a winter that you live through. So will you become obsolete? I think that to respond discerningly, you probably need to feel obsolete for at least a while. Because that's how you know that you might actually be engaging the way of the kingdom in the discussion that we're having. And then secondly, for the church, like as an institution, keeping pace and like, well, what if this is the modern day printing press? Are we going to get on board? I just want to say as an evangelical pastor that I think that the idea of relevance is almost entirely fool's gold. Yes. If not just fool's gold altogether. Yes. It is such a ridiculous idea. Every time that the church has been significant in human history, it has been small groups of people living an ancient way for generations, and then something beautiful comes from it. And so if we're going to be people who follow Jesus in this world, we have to have a longer range view than like, what's going to happen in the next 10 years or even just my lifetime. And that's what it will cost you to get a flip phone, is for you to have a longer range view about who you're becoming than how popular you are when you graduate. And I just want to say that is so worth living for. Yes. And whatever it takes for you to adopt that view, do it. And you will be so much smarter than any of us on the panel as a result. True. And so much deeper by the way of Jesus. And as a church, we have to believe that there is something more powerful than our winsomeness. Yeah. Like, winsomeness does not change the world. And so I just want to say, when we think about this as a church, we cannot be obsessed with like, well, how do we keep pace and appeal to the culture? And the way of Jesus is appealing. Like, that isn't our job. Our job is to live it in such a way that it is actually defining of us, so that generations down the line, we have proven through our lives a better way that people actually want to start falling into the stream of. Yes. Wow.
On this theme a little bit, I'm going to go to the audience for a question here. Little game. We're just doing one whiplash here, all kinds of things. I'd like all four panelists to say yes or no to this question. Can't be based on the person in front of you. You just got to say yes or no, and then we'll explain. Yes or no. Can Christians essentially decide to go full anti-tech and just put their head in the sand on this one? Head in the sand.
No.
No.
Yeah, no.
No.
Yeah, Megan, what about you? Why do you say no to that? Can't put our head in the sand on this one.
I gave you guys my hour-long spiel just a little while ago, but I do think that we are called to serve the common good, like in this world. Like, we're not just waiting for the next kingdom, but we are called to live out certain lives to improve this one, and that when we listen to the gospel, when we take our responsibility for our communities seriously, that calls us to speak into the issues of our time, maybe in a countercultural way, like maybe in a way that seems weird and gets us into trouble. That's always been a part of the bargain, but we still do it. Like, we still go out there, and I think that the core gospel ethics is profoundly relevant to the questions that everybody is like pulling their hair out about right now. Like, this might be a hard problem, but this is an easy one as far as relevance of Christian thought to things that people are worried about in the world. And so it would be an embarrassment if we decided to go all Benedict option on this one and just like pull up our drawbridge and decide we're going to wait it out and just let Elon fight it out with whoever. Like, we are called to say something very important and relevant right now.
Yeah, is Megan speaking for you all on this one?
100%.
Yeah.
Also, it's emerging. It's an emergent property, this intelligence that we're able to generate through these models. It's emerging from the very good world God made. It has so many good uses. I hope no one heard my talk and thought I'm somehow anti-tech. The only place I don't want it is when we're being formed. But what are you formed for? To create, to produce, to distribute, to save lives, to protect, there's so many uses. It would be crazy for us to somehow write it off when it's an amazing, it's as important as electromagnetism potentially, that the simplest of vector math combined with huge amounts of training actually generates this incredible flexible power that we can put to use for good, if we're formed. My only concern is that we'd be very careful about it where we're being formed.
I want to honor a lot of the audience questions that you wrote down. By the way, some fantastic conversations happening at the tables today. The questions that you wrote down were fantastic. Could you all give yourselves a hand for these conversations that you've been having? Or we will. Just let the panel clap for you. Okay. An enormous amount of the questions that were submitted had to do with practical concerns about how to put AI in the right practical place in your life. Is there a time limit on the internet? Just these kinds of things. What about my kids? Is there an age? This kind of thing. And I wonder if we could honor those questions here in closing with one final question I'd love for everyone in this panel to weigh in. What is one practical thing with regard to technology use, AI use, if it's come to you yet, iPhone, that you've put into practice in your life that you think could help someone get into some of the, make some of the gestures, if not get into a permanent posture of good use of these things? And I'll start with an example of the type of thing that I mean. I discovered that you can put your iPhone through the settings, Google it, figure it out. You can put your iPhone on a black and white setting, and it's way less engaging to look at. And weirdly less engaging. And I've done this at times when I feel that my relationship to this is getting a little disordered, which has become a little more often something I've been convicted today. Has anyone been convicted as a Christian today that you need to deal with some of these things a little bit differently? Am I alone? You're all looking at me. So putting the phone on black and white, and also doing this practice I heard on another podcast, which is, you have to plug your phone in to charge it, right? When you get home from work, plug your phone in and just consider it like a landline, like it's on a leash. You can't unplug it. So black and white and on a leash. That's something that's helped me get my relationship back in order. So that's the kind of thing I mean. Maybe getting that practical if you can down the line, or just everybody share something. Yeah.
I'll start. I think this is a really practical thing for me in the sense that a number of years back, it's been a while now, but I always felt that I was so pressed for time that I couldn't carve out that time for solitude and prayer, as Tyler has been talking about. I was like, where am I going to find the time? But in a inspired, and again, not an audible voice from the Holy Spirit, but definitely a conviction in my head. It's think about how much time you spend on social media on your phone. don't you think you could use some of that time to be in solitude, to be in prayer with me? And again, not audible voice, but it was definitely a convicting moment. And so in that moment, I said, first thing in the morning, I'm not going to pick up my phone.
Yeah.
I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to pray. And just that one decision alone, I think has really kind of forced me, like that commitment. Again, I don't want to be legalistic about it, but it's forced me to make a commitment to carve out at least a little bit of time in the morning to kind of use it in terms of this practice of solitude and prayer, and hopefully listening to God. And then out of those moments, I've had so many incredible encounters with the Lord and Him speaking to me in various different ways that when I didn't make that time, I couldn't hear Him say those things. Wow. So that's just a super practical thing that's not the first thing. I'm not going to catch up on my email or social feeds in the morning. No. Yes. Deciding not to do that has been a huge difference in my own life.
Yes. So
Yeah, I think I could just share really simply a couple of things that come to mind. One is quite similar. I plug my phone in at night on the opposite end of my house is where I sleep, and I don't use my phone until after I've been with the Lord each day. And the primary reason for that is Dallas Willard says that the mind is the primary battlefield of the spiritual life, which is basically the acknowledgement that, the fundamental story we believe as Christians is that there is an invisible reality that is more real than our tangible reality, and it is invading this reality even now. I don't know if that's occurred to you. That's what you're rooting your life in. And so to live in concert with the kingdom of God is to be daily in touch with that invisible reality first and foremost, and then to go about my day living in light of that inbreaking kingdom. And so I just think my imagination is a gift God has given me to steward on behalf of His kingdom. And so I want to place it in His story before I let any other narratives begin to play in my head each day. And then secondly, very practically, and I was kind of going through different things because everyone's engagement with technology and devices is going to be different based on the level of autonomy you have in your vocation. And I have a profound amount of autonomy in my vocation. And so I was trying to think, what do I do that could be helpful to someone that doesn't have that? And one practice is just this. I love to read. I love story, and so I like to read every type of literature, and I use devices a lot for my study, like my biblical study, the different books I'm reading from various theologians and stuff for the teaching that I get to do and the writing I get to do. But when I always have I always have a book of poetry going and a novel or a memoir going, and those books I only read on paper. And so I just think that uses a different part of my brain, it engages, and it tells me something different. Like when I'm holding a book, it's like a different part of me is alive. And so I don't know if that's helpful to anyone, but kick it old school with paper from time to time. Yeah.
We're sort of going to go 3 for 3 so far. It'll be interesting to hear what you have to say. In that, how to use it, I think, it requires so much discernment because these technologies are so flexible and so complex. And as you allude to, also everyone's job is different. Jobs are different one from another, and where does it really serve as an instrument? All that stuff. And so instead, it seems to me the wisdom keeps coming back to actually the patterns of non-use that equip us to step into the use discerningly. And the one general principle that has survived thousands of years now is Sabbath. And the way I cash that out is 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, and for our family, 1 week a year. Everything with an on and off switch is off. 1 hour a day, usually around the dinner hour for us, although also in the morning we don't get up. I go outside before I look at any glowing thing. And 1 day a week for us, that's Sunday Really, we use nothing. We might cook something, but we're not like Sabbatarian in the Jewish sense, but we do not engage in the world of the digital 1 day a week, and then one week a year when we take a week where we don't. And actually, when you have that use and non-use rhythm, you get the discernment you need as which parts are addictive, which am I overly dependent on, which are taking too much of my time. And it's weird that like 1 in 7 can be enough, and yet it totally is enough. I call Sabbath the circuit breaker for idolatry. Just throws the circuit on the idol, and it never comes back with the same power once you have Sabbath in your life.
So one thing that oftentimes helps when you're trying to change your habits, there's like retraction, like taking things away, but sometimes that's very difficult. I gave up drinking caffeine in January, and like that withdrawal, oh my God, it was terrible. And I appreciated the comments earlier from Tyler, like you very well might go through a period of painful withdrawal as you try to change your habits. So I'm going to try to give you something that's not a withdrawal, but a substitution. This helps a ton when you're trying to change your habits. If you're trying to kick like drinking soda, Coke, if you're a Coke Zero addict, for instance, like I was, then you just substitute LaCroix, and it kind of tricks you until you get healthy again. So here's my hack. It's 4 words, and this could totally change your life. In fact, I'll give you an assignment. You ready? Get ready to write this down, Jeff.
Is it? I'm so hopeful it's smoking cigarettes.
No, you can't smoke cigarettes. That totally helps. Exactly. That is going to totally help you beat your iPhone addiction. What could go wrong? No, all right, here are 4 words, and I'm going to have you guys, I'm going to give you an assignment. Ready? Give me a call. Give me a call. And here's what I want you guys to do. Every day for the next week, I didn't come up with this, my friend Jim did. Every day for the next week, there's going to be some occasion when you want to send a text, or you want to email someone, or you're lurking on Facebook or Instagram, kind of checking up on someone and trying to figure out what's going on with them. And you don't have to do it all the time, but just one day each week, one instance, instead of sending the text or the email, or instead of just lurking like a weirdo on their Facebook page, I want you to message them, but nothing other than give me a call. Or if you want to be nice, please give me a call. Please call me. So we wanted to have this discussion over email. Just give me a call. I want to hear your voice. And it doesn't have to be a long phone call, but just offer that if they don't have your phone number, because that's how fractured your relationship is right now. You might need to offer that in the text as well. I had a friend right before I left for this trip, a friend I haven't talked to in 10 years, who was messaging me on Facebook, just asking a kind of factual question. And I really appreciated this. She ended the second message with, hey, you know what? I really would love to talk to you on the phone. How about like next week? Do you have a time next week? We can just chat on the phone for 5 minutes. If you're hooked on your screen, you're hooked on this as a mechanism for communicating with other human beings, and you're not ready for the complete detox yet, here's the LaCroix to your Coke Zero is switching to, like, at least on the phone, you're talking and you're interacting live with a person, and you're getting like one more dimension of their humanity. So you don't have to do it for everybody, but just challenge yourself to take like one thing that's now totally digital and make it audio. And then maybe you kind of build up your confidence where you, like, in a couple months, instead of, you'll call someone and ask, hey, can we take a walk? And that's how you start to rebuild. I know, then it's getting really serious. So take it slow, and we can smoke some cigarettes and talk about tech. But give me a call. Just one interaction every day for the next week. Try to move it from screen to audio.
Friends, consider what we've had here today. Megan Sullivan, Notre Dame; Andy Crouch, beloved author; Tyler Staton, pastor at Bridgetown; Isaac Choi, our own professor. Would you please give them a hand?